It's the Duker, Larry Morrow, on WIXY1260.
Here on WIXY1260, and good morning, everyone. I'm the Duker, Larry Morrow. Good to be here. By the way, if you would like to chat, there's a number you can call in, and that number was just somewhere in front of me. Oh, there it is. If you would like to call and chat this morning, give me a call at 216-744-9499. That's 216-744-9499. So that was part of the British invasion, and that song actually came out of part of what Bob Dylan had written, and part of not only that, but it also came out of the Bible. Part of that. That was a great song by the Byrds. Well, anyway, good morning. I'm delighted to be here. It's been a long time since I've sat in front of a microphone and done a show, but I am delighted to be here on sort of the new WIXY1260, if you will. Again, if you would like to call and chat, give me a call, 216-744-9499. That's 216-744-9499. I got to tell you a cute story. When I was working in Flint, Michigan, just before I went to CKLW, then on to Cleveland, I was sitting in the studio on a Saturday morning, and a disc jockey from Detroit, whose name was Lee Allen, came up to me, and he said, and he had a young African-American kid with him, and he said, I want you to meet someone. He said, I'm promoting songs for Berry Gordy out of Motown. And he said, if you would like, he said, could I come into the studio and introduce him to you? And I noticed that he was blind. And he was only 14 years old, and I said, what is his name? He said, his name is Stevie Wonder. And he said, I want you to play this song if you can. I said, well, let me hear it first. And so I'm going to play the song that he played for me, that I was the first one in the Flint, Detroit area to ever play this song. And so here is little Stevie Wonder, the very first song he ever had. Right here on WIXY1260 with the Duker, Larry Morrow. That is Johnny Rivers right here on WIXY1260. Good morning, I'm the Duker, Larry Morrow, and I'm here to get your heart to quivel and your liver to bivel. Ain't nothing cooking but the peas in the pot, and they wouldn't be cooking if the potty wasn't hot. So anyways, it's nice to have you with us this morning. By the way, I got to tell you a cute story regarding Johnny Rivers. I was blessed to be nominated to the National Radio Hall of Fame in Chicago. And when I went to the induction ceremony, I'm sitting there with this guy to my left, and I said, who are you? And he gave me his name, and I said, well, what are you here for? And he says, well, I'm going to induct, I can't remember his name now, Wolfman Jack. He said, I'm going to induct Wolfman Jack. And I said, well, Wolfman Jack is going to be introduced by Johnny Rivers. He said, I am Johnny Rivers. But he had his real name, and I can't remember what that was then. And I actually slapped him on the shoulder, and I said, are you kidding? I've been playing your music for a long time, Johnny Rivers. So anyway, that was really wonderful to be at the National Radio Hall of Fame, to be with my dear close friend, Casey Kasem, who was the master of ceremony that night. But anyway, let's continue with more music here on WIXY1260. Let's get down with the Rolling Stones. Okay, right here on WIXY1260, the Stones, and with a 19 Nervous Breakdown.
WIXY Larry Morrow Radio.
I haven't heard that in a long time. Anyway, good morning, everyone. I'm the Duker, Larry Morrow, and I'm glad to be here on WIXY1260 online, by the way. It's great fun to be sitting in front of a microphone once again. I wanted to tell you a story regarding Terry Knight in the Pack. When I worked at WTRX in Flint, Michigan, just before I went to CKLW, and then before I came to Cleveland, I worked with a guy by the name of Terry Knight. And Terry Knight left WTRX in Flint and then went to CKLW. And after he left CKLW, then I replaced him at CK. And then he went on, but one of the wonderful things that Terry Knight and I did is that we both played guitars. And so Terry one day said, Larry, let's go out and make some money. So we would take our guitars, and at noontime, we would go to one of the shopping centers in Flint, Michigan, and play our guitars, and we would get paid $25 a piece for that. And so we thought that was great money. So when Terry Knight came to Cleveland, and now I'm at WIXY1260. I had spent that time 2 years at CKLW, and then I came to WIXY1260, and Terry Knight had a song called I Who Have Nothing at All, which is not a song that he ended up writing. But anyway, it was a wonderful song, and I took him to one of the high schools in Parma. I can't remember what the high school was. What's a big high school in Parma?
Valley Forge?
No, a littler one than that. Pardon? Nope, not Normandy. It was right on the corner of actually of where the McDonald's was at the time in Parma. But anyway, so I brought Terry Knight over there. I said, Terry, would you do a record hop with me? And so Terry Knight and the pack came, and they did a record hop with me. And here's the song that we played for the record hop. This was Terry Knight's first big record before they went on to be Grand Funk Railroad. Right here on WIXY1260, WIXY Online with the Duker, Larry Morrow. That is Terry Knight here on WIXY1260. You're with the Duker, Larry Morrow. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're having a good time this morning listening to WIXY1260 Online. Terry Knight, then, after that song, Terry went on to take his little band from Flint, Michigan, and they called him Grand Funk Railroad. And one of the great stories about Grand Funk is that Terry took his band to New York. Nobody had ever heard of Grand Funk Railroad. Terry Knight was one of these guys that was so promotionally minded. Was actually a genius at that. He bought the main billboard in New York at Times Square, and he booked the Grand Funk Railroad into the big the big event. Then I can't remember what that was, but it was their huge place. And Terry Knight booked him, and all it said was Grand Funk Railroad is coming. He sold out the event, and that was the beginning of Grand Funk Railroad becoming such a huge hit. But it was all because of Terry Knight. And sadly enough, Terry Knight and I stayed in touch for such a long period of time. And then one day I read in the in Billboard magazine that Terry had been murdered from his son-in-law, sadly enough. But he was brilliant at what he did. I got to tell you a great story. One of the most wonderful events that I'll talk about that in a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself because I want to talk about Neil Diamond, but at the same time, when I worked at WIXY1260, the guys that I worked with was Mike Ranieri in the morning, who ate nails for breakfast, and then the Duker, Larry Morrow, came on from 10 till 3, and then Lou King Kirby, and then the Wild Child. And when I tell you that he was wild, he was wild. And when he was on the air, he had sayings like, "I'm the Wild Child. I live in the woods. I know all the trees by the first name." And so I had heard so much of that, and I was a writer of jingles and songs. So I sat down and wrote a song called Get It On. And I played piano on the session. So here now is the Wild Child with Get It On. And then Wild Child Freak Out on WIXY1260.
Think you've got to be tame to make it, but I'm not the type I ain't about to take it. I don't dig that rule, and now I'm about to break it. So come get the child, and I'll show you how to shake it. So get it on. I'm really gone. I'm jammer, jelly tight, and peanut butter rye.
That was a Wild Child right here on WIXY1260. And I got to tell you something. When I wrote that song, we put it on a 45, and I gave it to the Plain Dealer during the Christmas season, so they could sell it. And we sold 10,000 copies of Get It On within about a 2 or 3 week period, and we took all the money and gave it to charity. But for those of you who may have that 45 around someplace, that is a real collector's item. And the Wild Child, he was as wild as they get. I remember one night, I dropped into the radio station just to say hi, and I had my wife with me, and I said, "You haven't met Dick Kemp yet, and so let me take you to the station and introduce you to the Wild Child." We walked in. I walked in first, and then I had to turn around, and I said, "You can't come in yet." She said, "Why?" And I said, "The Wild Child is sitting there, and the only thing he has on are the headphones. He's totally nude doing the show." I mean, he was the Wild Child. He was as wild as the man is, as you can imagine. We had our very first WIXY 1260 Appreciation Day, and I'm trying to think, it was probably 1967, 1968 or something like that. And Norm Wayne, the owner of the radio station, said, we're going to have our first WIXY Appreciation Day. And we held it out at a place called Chippewa Lake. And we were hoping to get about 20,000 people to come to this event. And so we ended up with 100,000 people. And all of a sudden, Norm Wayne said, oh, my God, we got to pick up Neil Diamond at the airport. Now, Neil Diamond had not had a big hit record at that time. All those records came later. The song that he had, and I can't remember what it was, but it was a West Coast hit. And Neil Diamond, but it was popular enough to at least come to our WIXY 1260 First Appreciation Day. And so here we are at Chippewa Lake, and Norm Wayne said, somebody's got to go pick up Neil Diamond. So I said, I'll do it. I was the only one who had what was called then a wagon. And those were those big, long cars. And so I went out to the airport to pick up Neil Diamond. We took the drum set, we put it on top of the car. Neil sat in the front seat with me with his guitar between his legs. And then from that event, Neil came out and he said, I'm going to sing a song for you. Just a brand new song that I've written. And he said, I hope that it turns out to be a big hit for me. And it was called Cherry, Cherry. So here's Neil Diamond with Cherry, Cherry right here on WIXY 1260.
It's the Duker, Larry Morrow, on WIXY 1260.
Got it? Okay. Sorry to interrupt that piece right there. But anyway, back to Neil Diamond and Cherry Cherry. From that relationship, when I picked up Neil Diamond and brought him to Chippewa Lake Park, Neil and I had become friendly. And I don't want to misinterpret this and say that we had become close friends. But whenever Neil would come to Cleveland, or whenever he wanted to do an interview or talk about another song, he would call me. And then I had this wonderful relationship with Neil Diamond. But Neil turned out to be one of the great finds, not only in terms of music, but when he came to Public Hall, I was asked to introduce him. And I wrote a book some time ago, about 8 years ago, and it talked about my life in radio. Maybe some of you have had it or you've read the book. It turned out to be a really good seller, which I was really proud of. But anyway, in the book, I have a picture of Neil Diamond and my wife, Rosary, because when I introduced Neil, it was one of those very wonderful events. I mean, Neil comes to Cleveland and performs in front of 100,000 people. The song Cherry Cherry becomes a big hit, and then you know the rest of it. Thank the Lord for the Nighttime and Hot August Nights, and the rest of it is history. Let me move forward here, and I want to talk about one thing that we had spoken about earlier. I had mentioned Johnny Rivers, and I said I couldn't remember what his real name was. So I'm sitting next to this guy, and I said his name was John Henry Ramosella. And he was going to introduce Wolfman Jack. And I said, well, what do you do? How did you get to know Wolfman Jack? He said, well, he used to play some of my songs on the radio. And some of you may recall that Wolfman Jack was working at a radio station out of Mexico. And they had the largest signal across America. It was 500,000 watts. And so everyone in America knew Wolfman Jack. And so Johnny Rivers was one of the very first people who went to him and said, would you play some of my songs? And he played Poor Side of Town and the rest of them. But that was the name that I wanted to remember. So some wonderful person called in from Florida saying it was Ramosella. So anyway, that was the rest of that story. Now I want to talk about... what did I want to talk about? What was next? What was we're going to play next?
Elvis next.
Oh, Elvis. Oh, yeah. Thank God that I have Jordan here next to me telling me where we're going. I have no idea. Norm Wayne would have a fit on WIXY 1260 if we're sitting here mumbling like this. But I want to talk about Heartbreak Hotel. When I went into the Marine Corps way back in the 50s, I left Pontiac, Michigan, and went on a bus to Detroit. And then when you get to Detroit, you're sworn in as a Marine, and I was sworn in. And then we took a plane to Chicago, and then on from Chicago out to Camp Pendleton, California. But we stopped over in Chicago. And Elvis had a big hit record at that time called his very first song called Heartbreak Hotel. And so we had about an hour layover in Chicago. And I took a couple of guys and I said, let's go get a Coke or something like that. So we went into the bar and we were sitting there and I said, you're not going to believe this, but Elvis Presley is sitting over there on a stool and at the bar by himself. I said, let's go over and say hi. And they said, oh, no, man, he's a big star. I said, no, come on, let's go. And they said, as long as you lead us in, we'll go over and say hi to him. So we did. I went over to Elvis and I said, Elvis Presley, I said, my name is Larry Morrow. I just joined the Marine Corps. And I want you to know that the very first song I ever bought was Heartbreak Hotel. And he said, thank you very much. And he said, and something to the effect of, thank you for joining the Marine Corps. Thank you for what you're about to do. And then later on, it wasn't only about 6 or 7 months later that Elvis actually joined the Army. But anyway, so the first hit record with Elvis, I write in my book, my very first interview was with a big-time star, and it was with Elvis Presley at that bar in Chicago. So here's Heartbreak Hotel.
Well, since my baby left me.
Well, there's Elvis Presley, and that, of course, that's the song that started his entire career, and he went on to be, along with Michael Jackson, maybe the biggest stars ever to pick up a microphone and sing. This is the Duker, Larry Morrow. We're on WIXY1260 Online, and if you would like to give me a call, it is WIXY1260 Online. I'd love to talk to you. There's someone on the phone now? Hi there. Who is this? Oh, I can't do it like that?
They don't have it fed through.
Oh, okay. Do I have to hold the phone? Okay.
Sure.
Let me do it like that. Hello there. Oh, it was Byzantine. Who is this? Are you there? Okay. All right. Well, whoever it was, he hung up. Okay, the school that Terry Knight first performed at in Cleveland was Byzantine High School. Oh, and one of the wonderful memories of my entire life. And you know what was right across the street from Byzantine High School was the first McDonald's restaurant in Cleveland. And I'll never forget. And our studio was just down the street off of Snow Road. And we would go to McDonald's, and you could get a very special at McDonald's. You could get a hamburger, a Coke, and fries for 99 cents. That'll give you some idea on how far back that was. I wonder what that would cost today. $5, $6, or whatever it was. But those are great memories. A couple of the things that I did on WIXY 1260 that became landmarks, I played 2 contests. One was called Larry, What's in the Box? And the other one was Larry, What's in the Box? And the other one was What's Cooking? Now, I want you to think about this. Here we are, 2020. We're going back 50-some years. I would get on the air, and, of course, in those days, women stayed home, which was really wonderful. And so I would get on the air and say, okay, it's time for Wonder What's Cooking, and it was sponsored by Wonder Bread. And what I would do is I would start giving an ingredient. I would start out by saying, this is something that you would cook at night for your family. And I would start off giving little ingredients like, okay, a spoon of salt. And then I would play a song, and then I might come back and I would say, okay, now a half a pound of butter. And then they would call in, and I would say, okay, what's cooking? And they would start giving me the titles of the recipe, and I would say, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. And I would play another song. That game that I played called Wonder What's Cooking turned out to be a real staple for the time that I was on WIXY 1260 for the entire 6 years that I was there. And then the other one was called Larry, What's in the Box? And I would say things like, well, it's bigger than a salt shaker, but it's smaller than a brick. And it is something that you keep in your kitchen. And then I would, play a song and say, good morning, Larry, what's in the box? And people would call in, and I would take maybe 5 or 8 phone calls and continue to say, no, that's not it, and then play records until someone guessed what it was. So those 2 games, What's Cooking and Larry, What's in the Box, became such an incredible staple for me on WIXY 1260. And whenever I would go places, people would call and say, Larry, a women's group would call and say, Larry, could you come out and play Larry, What's in the Box? And Wonder What's Cooking? In which I did, which was great fun. All right, it is time to continue with more music here on WIXY 1260. And what's next again?
Wouldn't it be nice?
Oh, well, yeah. Thank God that I have Jordan here to help me to tell me what's next. I keep on forgetting. I write it down, but then I got a million notes here. The Beach Boys. The Beach Boys came to Cleveland right after they had their very first hit record, and I was really pleased to announce them when we had it was called the WIXY1260 Belkin production. And we had all of these concerts at Public Hall, and 10,000 people would show up for these concerts. And, of course, I had the pleasure of introducing the Beach Boys and the song called Wouldn't It Be Nice, right here on WIXY1260 Online with the Duker, Larry Morrow. Well, for those of you who still may have an old Cleveland press around, when the Beach Boys would hear, and I was pleased to stay along with the WIXY Supermen and interview them. It was one of the real treats of my life to sit with a group that had just had one hit record out, but then I don't have to tell you what happened with the Beach Boys. Become one of the great groups ever in terms of hit songs. There are so many wonderful stories to tell here on WIXY1260. For those of you who are listening to WIXY1260 Online, you can give me a call. I would love to chat with you, and you might have some stories regarding Larry, what's in the box, wonder what's cooking, or some of the crazy things that we did on WIXY. And I will be talking to some of them, but talking about some of them. But I will tell you this. One of the greatest things that I loved is that I'd love to get into a piece of music where I could go, hey, this is the Duker, Larry Morrow, and ain't nothing cooking but the peas in the pot. And this was one of them right here. Here's Major Lance on WIXY1260, and this is Monkey Time. Major Lance here, Monkey Time, with the Duker, Larry Morrow on WIXY1260. If you would like to chat, just give us a call here on WIXY1260 Online. Would love to chat with you. I got to tell you some stories. One of the things that we did that I was not very proud of at the time that we did it, and it was it was a mini skirt contest, and then we did the Francine contest. And sadly enough, what happened was there was and I believe it started on the Johnny Carson show. Johnny Carson showed a woman who was rather motherly endowed and had a rather large bust and attracted thousands and thousands, if not a million people in New York City. I wasn't really sure. But Norm Wayne at that time thought, you know what, let's do the Cleveland version of that. So we had the Francine contest, and we had it at Public Square, and we asked women to come down who were, again, motherly endowed, rather large, busted women. And here we had all these teenagers coming down. And we got 10,000 kids to come down, and we actually ended up picking who had the largest bust. And I wasn't really very proud of that, but it turned out to be something that was very important to the radio station at that time. Another thing that we did that was fun to do, but I didn't realize what the result would be. We did the miniskirt contest. Miniskirts had become very, very popular. And again, we were drawing large crowds at Public Square. Wherever WIXY1260 did a promotion, 10,000 people would show up. And so we had the miniskirt in downtown Cleveland at Public Square. And we had a stage that was 12 by 12 by 12, 12 wide, 12 wide, 12 lengthwise, and 12 high. Well, now you have all these young girls, teenagers, and girls into their early 20s with miniskirts on, up on this 12-foot stage, and you can imagine all these young teenage kids sitting looking up at it. And again, we attracted a lot of people, and we made big headlines when we did things like that. But I was never proud of those kinds of things, and I was glad that we finally got rid of those things. And I will tell you, the biggest promotion that WIXY1260 ever did, and I'll tell you about that coming up in a few minutes like that, and that from now, and that was when I was asked to go to Vietnam. We'll talk about that in a minute. But okay. So now let's continue with more music here on WIXY1260. You're with the Duker, Larry Morrow, on a Saturday morning, and I am just having the time of my life, getting your heart to quiver and your liver to bibble. All right, let's continue with more music on WIXY1260. Ah, yeah. Let's go to Take a Ride. Jenny, Take a Ride with Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels. Stop yelling, Mitch Ryder. Another guy from Detroit. Let's do it. Mitch Ryder and the Detroit Wheels here on WIXY1260, sounding a lot like Little Richard. As a matter of fact, when that came out, people accused him of sounding a lot like Little Richard because he stole some of his little nuances. All right, let's talk about the biggest promotion that WIXY1260 ever did, which really turned the radio station upside down, or downside up, I should really say. Because we had done so many of these promotions, like the big bus contest and the miniskirt contest, we really wanted to do something that would attract a larger audience, because we had the kids. I mean, every person who could afford to get a little transistor radio listened to WIXY 1260, and there was a survey done one weekend, and you may or may not remember the promotion, but it was the what we put on the top of your antenna? The Tenor Topper. We had a promotion called the WIXY Tenor Topper, and I'll get into the Vietnam story in a minute. But the WIXY Tenor Topper was the one promotion that showed the entire greater Cleveland area that it was not only kids listening to the radio station, but it was adults as well. And we were having a real problem with advertising agencies trying to convince them that adults listen to the radio station as well. So the WIXY Tenor Topper was a promotion based on this. One of the big restaurants in Cleveland at the time was called Manners Big Boy. And so the promotion went like this. You would go to Manners Big Boy and pick up a WIXY Tenor Topper, and on the WIXY Tenor Topper was a number. It was like a 6 or 8 digit number. And so then you would pick up that WIXY Tenor Topper, take it home, and then every once in a while we would say, if you have WIXY Tenor Topper 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you have now 12 minutes and 60 seconds to call into WIXY 1260, and you will win dinner for 4 at Manners Big Boy. That promotion turned out to be a huge promotion, but here's the reason why it took off to be so successful. Norm Wayne thought it would be a great idea if we could take a helicopter or a couple of helicopters on a Saturday during the summer and take them around to all the shopping centers, take pictures of all the cars that had a WIXY Tenor Topper on them, and then go back to the advertising agencies and say, see, look at how many people have their radios tuned to WIXY 1260. Well, it was unbelievable, because when we got the results back, maybe 90%, but surely not less than that, 90% of every car in every shopping center had a WIXY Tenor Topper on it. And it turned out to be one of the biggest promotions, because now we could go to advertising agencies and say, look how many people are listening to WIXY 1260. And these are not kids, because kids at that time were not driving. So these weren't 14-year-old kids. Well, the WIXY Tenor Topper promotion, again, turned out to be one of the greatest ever, until we now have decided that we're going to take WIXY 1260 in a different direction, not in terms of music, but just in terms of the way that the audience would view WIXY 1260. So the program director was Bill Sherrard, and the promotion director at that time was Linda Scott. And they called me into his office, and he said, Larry, we got a great idea. And they said, we just found out that we have 220 kids in Vietnam that are from Cleveland. And we thought it would be a great idea, since you were in the Marine Corps, that you would go to Vietnam and interview all these kids, and then bring the interviews back, and we'll play them over Thanksgiving and Christmas. And I said, I said, first of all, I would do it, being in the Marine Corps. And I said, but at the time, I said, we're not going to get permission. And we did not. We went to everyone. We went to our congressman. We went to the governor. We went to the mayor. Everyone we could think of to write letters to the government to get us permission to go to Vietnam. And it was at that time that the Vietnam War was being played out on national television for the very first time, and it was very, very negative. So we got turned down. And then one day, I get a call from the Pentagon, and it was Colonel Melton. And I take the phone call and said, hi, is this Lawrence Morrow? And I said, I don't know who you are, but I haven't been called Lawrence since I was in a Catholic school in the first grade. Excuse me. And I said, what can I do for you, Colonel? I mean, you don't get a call from the Pentagon every day. And he said, Mr. Morrow, he said, your request to go to Vietnam has ended up on my desk. President Nixon would like an end to this war, but we really want to find out how the enlisted men over in Vietnam feel about the war. Not only enlisted men, but the officers as well. And they said, so we're going to send you to Vietnam, and you're going to interview every kid that's in Vietnam from Cleveland, all the bases in Vietnam, and at the time, then you're to ask every one of them how they feel about the Vietnam War, and then make that confidential report back to me when you leave Saigon. So now I get my papers in the mail. And I great big package from the Pentagon. And again, I had not told anyone at the station that I had gotten permission to go until I got the papers. So I get the papers. Excuse me. I get the papers, and that, by the way, that's one thing you never did on the air, was to clear your throat. But since this is WIXY1260 Online. So I get the papers in the mail, and they're addressed to Major Lawrence D. Morrow. Now, when I was in the Marine Corps, I was a corporal, so I was an enlisted guy. I was not a major. So I called the Pentagon back right away, and I said, someone has made a terrible mistake at the Pentagon, because all of these, everything that I have here was addressed to Major Lawrence D. Morrow. And they said, no, that's correct. You're going to get all of your shots. I had to get 21 shots before I went to Vietnam. And then when you get to Saigon, Colonel Melton will explain to you why you are a major. So I get to Vietnam. It was a long trip, by the way. It was 5-6 hours to California, and then from California to Hawaii, another 5 hours, and then 5 hours from Hawaii to where was it? I can't remember. And then on to Vietnam. The whole trip took me about 21 hours on the plane. It was brutal. So then I go to see Colonel Melton, and I said, Colonel Melton, I said, here I am. He gave me the insignia that that said that I was a major, and I believe that it was a gold leaf. And so, and I said, why major? He said, because when you're traveling all through Vietnam, interviewing not only Cleveland area kids, but you're going to be interviewing everyone and talking to everyone, because you're going to ask them how they feel about the war. If you're just an enlisted man and you get captured by the Viet Cong, they will probably shoot and kill you. But if you're a major, they'll capture you and then negotiate to get their people back. So that's how I ended up being Major Lawrence D. Morrow. And it's a great story. So now I go to Vietnam. I come back. We send all the interviews that I did with every Cleveland area kid that I could find. And there were so many of them that I interviewed in hospitals and in the field and everywhere. What was interesting is that WIXY1260 was so incredibly popular that whenever I would see someone, I would say, like, I would say, Corporal Jordan's here, Jordan, and he would say, oh man, the Duker Larry Morrow is here from the world. When you were in the service and in the military at that time, and in Vietnam, anyone that was outside of Vietnam was considered the world. So they said the Duker Larry Morrow is here from the world, and I brought all those interviews back, and we played those interviews not only at Thanksgiving time, but we played them for Christmas as well. And then I sent a cassette to every single. To the mothers and fathers of every single kid that I interviewed in Vietnam. And that promotion took WIXY1260 from being a bubblegum kind of radio station to being an adult radio station. And when Bill Hickey wrote the article, I believe the title of the article was called WIXY1260 becomes an adult radio station. And that promotion turned out to be, at least for the 6 years that I was there, maybe the most important and impactful promotion that we ever did. And so, and I have so many wonderful memories of that. Now, speaking of that, there was a book out. I wrote my book and talked a little about WIXY1260 in it. But my friend Michael Olszewski, along with Richard Berg and Carlo Wolf, wrote a book called WIXY1260, which is a wonderful softcover book. And I have read it, and I have a copy of it, and talks a lot about what WIXY1260 was about. And Michael really did his homework. And he talked to me about it. He interviewed a lot of people who were part of WIXY1260 at that time. But when I got back from Vietnam, we couldn't find any of the tapes, any of the cassettes that I had recorded in Vietnam. And one day, someone had talked to Michael Olszewski and says, Larry Morrow was looking for some of these tapes because Channel 5 wanted to do a 50th anniversary of my time in Vietnam. Michael Olszewski had some of those tapes and gave them to me, and we gave them to Channel 5. And so last year we did the 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War and the 50th anniversary of me being in Vietnam. And what's so fascinating about that is that as soon as that story was done last year, I got a call again this year saying, Larry, would you come down? We want to do another story on TV5 about your time in Vietnam. And I said, well, we did it last year. And they said, yeah, but guess who we found? When you got off of the plane at Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base in Vietnam, the very first person from Cleveland who met you walked up and said he was so-and-so. And he said, that guy, we found who it was, and he's coming down to do a story with you on Channel 5. And we did that just a couple of months ago, and which was really something. And I have all these wonderful people here at WIXY1260 Online. I'm going to show them that incredible picture. So anyway, well, let's continue with more music here on WIXY1260. What are we playing next, Jordan?
We got the Archie, Sugar Sugar.
Oh, yeah. WIXY1260 became, I mentioned it earlier, the worst thing you could be called in radio was a bubblegum radio station, which meant that only kids listened to it. But guess what? This was one of the songs that we loved, and it was Sugar Sugar. And it was the precursor to what we called bubblegum music at that time. So let's continue with the Duker, Larry Morrow, on WIXY1260.
Gentlemen, this is WIXY 1260 Online with special guest DJ, the Duker, Larry Morrow.
Another hour of music
And I am the Duker, Larry Morrow. I don't know if I sound much like I sounded 50 years ago or over 50 years ago, but it was great fun being the Duker. Well, where did that come from? Where did the name the Duker come from? Well, I was working at CKLW at the time, which was one of the big stations in the Detroit-Windsor area, a 50,000-watt radio station. And I gotta tell you, it was really wonderful being on that radio station. I had arrived, in my opinion, at CKLW probably too early in my career. You don't normally get to a major market like Detroit, which was the fifth largest market in America at the time, without somewhere 10 to 12 to 15 years experience. And all of a sudden, I'm there in 2 years because the guy that I replaced at CKLW was Terry Knight. And Terry Knight and I worked in Flint, Michigan. And then when Terry was getting ready to leave to go start his band, he said, the guy that you need to hire is a guy out of Flint, Michigan called Larry Morrow. And so that's how I ended up at CKLW. But while at CKLW, being this big 50,000-watt radio station, I was so excited because I'm finally going to be on this huge radio station with my name, Larry Morrow. And up until that time, I was not allowed to use my name. And when Flint, Michigan, I was one of the Jones boys, like John Paul Jones or something like that. And so here I am. I'm getting ready to go on the air. And about an hour before I go on the air from 7 to midnight, the owner of the radio station said, we just got a great idea. Since we're in Windsor, Ontario, we're going to change your name from Larry Morrow to Duke Windsor. So you're going to go on the air as Duke Windsor. And I said, Duke Windsor? They thought, well, it'd really be cool. I mean, you're the Duke of Windsor. Well, I took the Duke Windsor piece and I created a nickname called the Duker. So people knew me from Cleveland as the Duker. And because the signal was so powerful coming right across Lake Erie, I didn't realize this. But when I got a call from Norm Wayne to come to this brand new radio station called WIXY1260, he said, are you aware that your show from 7 to midnight on CKLW is #1 in Cleveland? And I said, no, I was not aware of that. And so that is how I ended up coming to Cleveland. And so the great story about coming to Cleveland was Norm Wayne was excited about having the Duker, Duke Windsor, be his new guy from 10 till 3 o'clock. And so I was interviewed by Jane Scott, the popular writer from the Plain Dealer at that time. And Jane Scott said, by the way, can I ask you a question? I said, sure. She said, it's a personal question, but is Duke Windsor your real name? And I said, no. Why would I ever call myself Duke Windsor? And she said, well, what is your real name? And I said, my real name is Larry Morrow. So she wrote this article, and on the article said, WIXY1260 makes the Duke theirs. And it was on the front page of the Action tab, which was a great big magazine on a Friday night. And everyone read that magazine. So now I go on the air, and the program director, Johnny Canton at the time, said, what are we going to call you? And he said, here's this article that said, your real name is Larry Morrow. And he said, we better put you on the air as Larry Morrow and just use your nickname, the Duker. So go on the air as Larry Morrow. But Norm Wayne, again, is out of town, and he was excited about having Duke Windsor to be his midday guy. And he was excited about the fact that everyone knew who Duke Windsor was, but no one had ever heard the name Larry Morrow. So I'm on the air now for about a week and a half. Norm Wayne is driving back from Pittsburgh and is listening to WIXY1260, and he wants to hear his Duke Windsor guy. He's listening, and he said, I know that's Duke Windsor, but who the hell is Larry Morrow? And so he comes into the radio station. He actually didn't open the door. He kicked the door to open it. And he looks at me, and of course the microphone was off, and he looks at me and he said, who the hell is Larry Morrow? And even in all of my interviews with him, I never told him my real name. He never asked, so I never told him. And he says, you've blown the whole thing. We hired Duke Windsor, the Duker, Duke Windsor. So then about a year and a half after that, when the ratings came out, and I was number one from 10 until 3 o'clock with huge ratings, I sent him a little note, and I said, Dear Norm, you no longer have to say, who the hell is Larry Morrow? And now that we were number one, and I saved that piece for the longest period of time. All right, let's continue here on WIXY 1260. We have a piece here with Joe Zingali, who is one of the three owners of WIXY 1260. I have no idea what it says, but we're going to play it. Go ahead, Jordan.
And I present to you a very close friend over the years. 16 years ago, I came to his radio station. The owner of WIXY Radio at the time, Joe Zingali. Hello, Joseph. How are you?
Larry, just fine.
What a weekend, huh?
What a weekend. You talk about deja vu. It's astonishing to me how many lives we touched with the old WIXY 1260.
You know, Joe, a guy called in here today, and of course before I got to WIXY, and he said, Larry, I have an old WIXY 1260 survey, and he mentioned Howie Lunn, Johnny Canton, Johnny Walters, Al Gates, Joey Reynolds, and Bobby Magic. That had to be the very first lineup at WIXY.
It was. That was exactly the first. That's when we first bought the station. First changed the format.
Sure.
To the rock. And people thought we were crazy because there were two other rockers in town at the time. There was WHK, was owned by Metro Media, and all the money in the world. They owned the Billboard company in town. And of course it was KYC also was the station you're on now, which was 50,000 watts. That was owned by NBC. Those were the number one and number two radio stations in Cleveland in 1964 is when we bought the station. And of course we bought the sleepiest station in town was the old WDOK, owned by Fred Wolf at the time, used to have polkas on all the time. And out of 8 AM radio stations, I think that was ranked 9th. So we changed the format, and people told us we were crazy for going rock because there were too many rockers, and the market couldn't support 3 top 40 stations. And I said, yeah, you're right, but we'll be the survivors because we were, local people, and we could move faster. That's really what we did.
You know, Joe, when I came here in 1966, when you and Norm Wayne talked to me, came in one day, he said, this station, both of you said, this is going to be the greatest radio station that this city will know. And I said, no way. There is absolutely no way. But since I was out of a job, I said, I'll come to Cleveland for a few months, 16 years ago.
No, it's not only do we become the top radio station in Cleveland, Larry, but do you realize that in the late 60s, WIXY was known as the top radio station in the country?
Oh, sure.
I mean, we were doing, as a matter of fact, there are stations around the country now that are called WIXY, WEXY. We started that whole series of rhyming nicknames.
Oh, sure. You know, Joe, in 1969, I was very fortunate to be named the Disc Jockey of the Year nationally. And that was because WIXY was so popular.
Yes.
And you've heard all of the people talking about the WIXY Dream House, the WIXY Tenatopper.
Right.
Promotion was the name of the game, wasn't it?
Absolutely. We used to think of promotions as a matter of course. As a matter of fact, that brings up one thing. I don't think anyone's ever mentioned this, at least today. Do you remember the Francine contest that WIXY had?
I had nothing to do with that, but yeah, of course, I remember it. Let's chat about how that came to be because we stopped traffic in downtown Cleveland that day.
Crazy. Actually, what happened is I read the New York papers, and there was a gal that walked down Wall Street. Her name was Francine Goldfarb, or something. I forget what her name was, but her name was Francine, and she was known as Francine who stopped traffic on Wall Street because she was, let's say, very well developed. And at 12 noon, literally, traffic would stop on Wall Street. So we thought about this, and we said, why can't we have, Cleveland's got girls that are even more developed than Francine. We decided to have a Cleveland Francine contest, and we had it at 12 noon down at 9th and Euclid, and there were thousands and thousands of people came out of these lawyer types with and accountant types with shirts and ties, all there, and these well-developed gals were on display, and it was just hilarious. I mean, it stopped traffic, and I guess we sent that gal to New York City to then walk down Wall Street. It was Cleveland's answer to Francine.
Sure.
And they had Johnny Carson talked about it. It was in the Wall Street Journal. I mean, it was that kind of thing that really made the old WIXY swing.
Yeah, I'll never forget Bill Hickey. During one of our interviews, he said, WIXY has finally grown up because we had done so many promotions like that with the WIXY Tenatopper and Francine, and we did the miniskirt contest, which, again, stopped the traffic in downtown Cleveland when we had that at Public Square. When we went to Vietnam, Joe, that was the topper of everything, remember?
Yes.
1969.
That's right. That's right. Well, we tried to keep current. We tried to keep it fun and current, and, Norm worked on that real hard. Bob did, and I did, and it was fun. It was fun for the whole crew.
I'll never forget when the three of you sat me down and said, Larry, you're going to Vietnam. What do you think of that? And I said, what? In 1969. But to get all of those interviews, Norm, from all of those kids, to bring them home and play them on the air, and then finally give the interviews to the parents in this city, really did touch the hearts of the families.
Well, that's what we tried to do, and it was a good time because we had a good crew. We had a lot of fun. I mean, we really did have a lot of fun doing it, and it was even fun owning the place.
Sure,
we did well, and
well, the parties.
Of course, that's right. That's right. We had some great parties, staff parties. We always had two staff parties, if you remember.
Sure.
One was the Christmas party, which was for the whole family. And no one else. And then we had a summer party.
That was the summer party for the families.
For the families, that's right. So it was a close-knit group. And then you remember the hair party. You remember that?
Oh, sure. Your wife was on earlier talking about that.
Oh, was she really? I'll be darned.
Yeah. Mary Jo was on earlier talking about the hair party.
That was great. That was just great times, no question about it.
Well, Joe, thanks. It was.
It's great to hear you. You're one of the great talents in broadcasting. You still are. I love to hear you. You're a gentleman not only on the air but off, and it's fantastic to hear this recreation again. It's a ball for me.
Okay, Joe, we're going to continue with it.
All right, very good.
Joe, God bless. See you soon. I'm Larry Morrow. Let's continue. 1968, baby. Paul Revere and the Raiders. We brought him to town too.
You're with the Duker, Larry Morrow, here on WIXY 1260 on a Saturday. It's a beautiful Saturday. Paul Simon, Art Garfunkel here on WIXY 1260 and Homeward Bound. I was just talking to our producer, Jordan, and how music has changed from one generation to the other. When I came to WIXY 1260 from CKLW, it was all about the British invasion. And the Beatles started all of that. And then the Rolling Stones, and then the Animals, and on, so the story goes. And then it changes again, and then it goes to another, then it went to bubblegum music after that. And so every generation brings their own music along with them. I remember when I was at CKLW, and this new group walked in, this little guy by the name of Paul Simon had Art Garfunkel, which I thought had the weirdest hair I'd ever seen. Looked like he had put his hand into an electric outlet, and he was shocked. It was very weird to see that, but it was their first. It wasn't Homeward Bound. I can't remember what their first song was called, but that was the beginning of Simon and Garfunkel. But anyway, I want to get back to the Joe Zingale story because Joe has since passed and now is in heaven. And I just saw his wife the other day, Mary Jo, and we were reminiscing on some of the wonderful things that went on with WIXY 1260. But I got to tell this great story. When I came to WIXY 1260, the name Duke Windsor was a real big name in Cleveland at the time, but WIXY 1260, we had to earn our stripes. And WIXY 1260 within 18 months to 2 years, as Joe had indicated, we just took the entire city by storm. And so I remember saying to Norm Wayne, Norm, who do I have to beat in Cleveland? And he said, there's a guy by the name of Bill Randall. Bill has the biggest ratings. And I said, okay. And I listened to Bill Randall, who I later had great respect for. But at that time, I thought, he was doing a contest on WERE called something, and I thought, that's terrible. He ought to be playing rock and roll music, and he wasn't. So I found out that Bill was making $38,000. Now, I must tell you something. I made big money when I came to Cleveland, $9,000. That was about as big amount of money as you can imagine. And I thought, the guy that I need to beat is making 38. And I'm making 9. But then again, WIXY 1260 had no ratings. Well, within 18 months, we're number 1. So then I had mentioned earlier that I was really blessed. There was a magazine called Mirror Magazine, which was the precursor to the People magazine of its day. And I get a call one day and they said, we're doing a story, and we've done our research, and we're doing a story on the top 12 DJs in America. Now, there are 13,000 radio stations in America, and each radio station had roughly 5 to 6 DJs. And they said, we're going to release the information. I thought it's just going to be a big story about the 12 top DJs, and I was honored to be one of them. But they said, we're going to do it one per month. January would be one, February would be another, March would be another, and I was the January issue of the top 12 DJs in America, and you can imagine how it swelled my heart to have that go on. So now, with that in mind, the numbers became incredible. I ended up with a big share today would be, 9-10% of the audience. At WIXY, I was with 28 for a long period of time. Then the 28 went to 50. And then we did some kind of a contest over the weekend. And I can't remember what it was for. And I'm on the air on WIXY from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon on Saturday. And we did this contest, and I ended up with an 80% share of the audience. So then the next rating period comes out, and I go back to a 50. And I remember getting a note from Norm Wayne saying, Duker, we will no longer put up with this kind of slippage from 80 to 50. and so now I become number 1. The Cleveland Press did a story on who's the most popular DJ in Cleveland, and I ended up winning that contest. And so after I had won the contest, I'm still making less than $10,000. So I remember going into Norm Wayne. There were 3 owners of the radio station. Norm Wayne was the general manager. Joe Zingali was the sales manager, and then there was Bob Weiss, I believe, who was the national sales manager. And they all owned the radio station equally. So I go into Norm Wayne and I said, "Hey Norm, I said I want to raise." And he said, "What for?" And I said, "Well, Norm," I said, "I'm now Cleveland's most popular DJ, and I've worked really hard for that." And he said, "How much money do you want?" And I said, I beat Bill Randall so badly, he doesn't even show up in the ratings." And I said, "He's making $38,000, and I'm still making less than 10." So I told him that I wanted $20,000. And so Norm said, "You want $20,000? So he calls his wife, Nina. And he gets Nina on the phone. He said, "Nina," he said, "the Duker's in front of me, and he wants $20,000. So Nina said, "Put Larry on the phone." So I talked to Nina, and Nina said, "Do not leave his office without making sure that you get the $20,000 raise." So I said to Norm, I said, "By the way, I just want you to know that your wife thinks I should have the money." So now Norm says, you need to talk to Joe Zingali and Bob Weiss. So I go into Joe Zingali, and Joe said, "You want $20,000? Can I ask you how much money you made last year?" And I said, "Well, I made less than $10,000. "No." He said, "Larry, how much money did you make doing jingles, doing commercials?" He said, "And you've done jingles that are now all over America." He said, "How much money did you make?" I said, "Joe, this is really unfair. I'm only coming here as the performance of WIXY 1260. And so I had made a lot of money, to be really honest with you. And it was much more than $10,000 doing all this other work." And he said, "You want $20,000, and all this money that you've made away from WIXY 1260 came from me, from me introducing you to the jingle company, introducing you to all the advertising agencies. I said, Joe, that is so unfair. They ended up giving me the raise. You know what it was? They said, Norm called me and said, we're going to give you what you want, almost. They gave me $19,000, $19,999.99. They refused to give me the $20,000. So I was a penny shy of getting the $20,000. But those were wonderful times at WIXY 1260. And then, of course, I stayed there for 6 years. And the day that I left, Norm, Joe, and Bob had called a press conference. And they called the radio station together, and they said, by the way, just want you to know that we've sold the radio station. They didn't tell anybody, but they paid $1 million for it, and they ended up selling it for $15 million 6 years later. And so with that in mind, I was doing so much work away from the radio station, doing jingles and commercials, that I had saved enough money. And I thought, you know what? If they're selling this radio station, it is never, ever going to be the same. So I did my show that day. I did my 5 hours from 10 till 3. I got off the air and I went into Norm and I said, Norm, I'm leaving WIXY 1260. You're leaving? And so am I. He said, oh, you have to stay. I mean, you've got a wonderful career here. You've been here for 6 years. And I said, Norm, I'm leaving. Besides all the work that I do at the radio station, I'm making promotions with all the advertising agencies, trying to get more money in here for the salesmen and for the radio station. And I said, I'm tired. I'm doing 6 record hops a week, sometimes 7. And I said, I'm just tired. I work at the radio station for 8 or 9 hours a day, and then I'm doing these record hops. I'm just really tired. And so I did leave. I ended up leaving. He said, can you stay until September, which I did. And then I ended up leaving WIXY 1260, and the rest of it's history. And I went up to, I left there and ended up on 1100, 3WE for 10 years. And then I went to Q104 for 15. Then I went national. It was called Coast to Coast with Larry Morrow. And I'll never forget saying, I didn't want to go back on the air. And Terry Stewart at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, who was the chairman at the time, said, Larry, how many listeners did you have when you were on WIXY 1260? And I said, 80% share of the audience. He said, how many listeners? And I said, well, maybe 500,000, 400,000, something like that. He says, how does 23 million sound? So I thought that'll be kind of fun. I'll open up the microphone and go on Sirius Satellite and say, hi there, good morning, I'm the Duker, Larry Morrow, to 23 million people. So I did that for about 2 or 3 years, and then one day I said, you know what, I think I'm done. And I remember going to Terry, and I said, Terry, I can't do it anymore. I've been on the air for over, 45 years, and I think it's time to leave. And he said, but Larry, look at all, you got millions of people listening to you nationally, and they love you and stuff. And I said, no, it's time. And the headphones that I have on now, they have my name on the side of it, called, so it just says Morrow. So differentiate me from the Wild Child's headphones and Chuck Knapp and Lou Kirby and Mike Ranieri and the rest. And on the way home that night, after I did my last show on Sirius Satellite Radio, and I looked down and I saw my headphones there, and I said, you know what, I don't think I'll ever put them on again. And I got to tell you something, this is the first time that I have put them on since I left radio 20 years ago. And here I am, back to WIXY 1260. So I've come full circle. Well, let's continue with more music here in WIXY 1260 with the Duker, Larry Morrow. You're with the Duker, Larry Morrow, here on WIXY 1260. This has been some of the greatest fun I've had in a long, long time. I have not sat in front of a microphone other than to do commercials, and I teach at John Carroll. I'm a adjunct professor of executive communications at John Carroll University. So I hung up the microphone to go start teaching, and I teach presentation skills and things like that. So it's great fun. But I understand that maybe Chuck Knapp might be listening online. I'm not really sure, but Chuck, if you are, we all had nicknames. My nickname was the Duker. Mike Ranieri was Mike Ranieri, I eat nails for breakfast. Chuck Knapp was the napper. And I got to tell a great story. We had a basketball team called the WIXY All-Stars. And at one time, it was when we first started, it was called the Larry Morrow WIXY All-Stars. But the biggest All-Stars on the team were Chuck Knapp and Billy Bass. And now Billy Bass was African-American. And we were worried at that time because we had the Huff riots the Huff riots in Cleveland, and the riots that came out of California, out of Detroit, and out of Baltimore. And so being an African American on a radio station wasn't the most popular thing, but Billy Bass had this fabulous voice and was a great personality. And so we took the WIXY All-Stars, and we decided, and what we would do, during the course of the basketball season, we would go out to all of these high schools, and they would put a team together to play the WIXY All-Stars. And by the way, we never lost a game, because we had ringers. I had Paul Warfield, who played for the Miami Dolphins, played for the Browns. Farrah Hooker, who was a wide receiver for the Browns. These were some of the guys that were on the team. But we also had the WIXY1260 Superstars, and two of them happened to be Billy Bass and Chuck Knapp. And we decided to find out how popular Billy Bass was. We took Billy out to Lakewood High School to play the Lakewood High School Superstars, if you will. Billy Bass scored 38 points, but I'll never forget, I saved introducing Billy. I introduced all the players, and then at the end, I introduced Billy Bass, and they brought the house down for Billy, which said to everyone at that point in time, he's a very, very popular guy. He was doing our night show. Wild Child had left and had gone to our WIXY station in Pittsburgh at that time. And so he was very, very popular. And Chuck Knapp was maybe the best basketball player on the team, along with Billy Bass. So, and if Chuck, if you're listening, the Napper, you are something. And maybe some of the greatest moments of my life were with you and your darling wife and my wife, and we did so many wonderful things together. But those years at WIXY 1260, maybe some of the best in radio ever. And they are for me. And even though we both went on to do different things, I understood that you were doing great radio in Minnesota and doing Christian radio. And I am a Christian as well, so I thought about you from time to time. God love you, my friend. And I hope that you are listening. All right, now, I wanted to talk about something, a promotion that we did was called the Flying Saucer promotion. I really don't know much about the promotion, but I understand that I was part of it, so we're going to listen right now to it.
The WIXY Flying Saucer is somewhere over WIXYland. Listen, if the phone number you are about to hear is yours, you may have already won a fabulous prize.
Now, we had a winner last hour. Let me see if you'll be our second winner of the day. The WIXY Flying Saucer is hovering over South Euclid. It's zeroing in on Edmond Drive. It's contacting phone number 381-856-. 381-856-. If that's your phone number, call me within 3 minutes at 351-3778. That's 351-3778, because you've just won a Dormeyer 4-slice toaster.
Okay, now I remember the promotion. I got to say something about my voice. When we got into radio, it was you tried to lower your voice to be someone that you probably were not. And when I listened to my old air checks, and that's one of them, again, that's over 55 years ago, I would never sound like that. I don't sound like that today, but I can remember as I listened to some of these air checks, and it sounded like this. Hi, this is the Duker, Larry Morrow on WIXY 1260. What? What was that? and I remember during the National Radio Hall of Fame induction ceremony, I'm sitting next to Paul Harvey. And I said to Paul, I said, Paul, I've been listening to you forever. And somehow I maybe have listened to you for 50 years, and your voice sounds as young and crisp today as it did 50 years ago. And he said, Larry, he said, I'll tell you something. I do the scales every morning. And for those of you who may not know what the scales are, people who talk a lot or sing a lot, they do the scales. Things like la, 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 la. And so he said, if you do the scales, what it will do is it will force your voice from your throat into the upper chestal area and then finally out of your diaphragm. And then you'll be speaking out of your diaphragm rather than, hey, baby, what's happening? And that kind of thing. And so it took me a while. When I left WIXY 1260, I actually dropped that kind of voice because it wasn't my real voice. And when I ended up going to 1100, which was a 50,000 watt radio station, I became sort of the real guy, using my real voice without forcing it down. Hey, baby. But it was fun. It was great fun working at WIXY 1260. Well, let's continue here. We've got more stories and we don't have a lot of time to tell them, but we'll continue on WIXY 1260 with the Duker, Larry Morrow. Boy, I have loved that song forever. I fought the law, and the law won. Bobby Fuller 4. It brings back such great memories. I want to get back to tell a story about the Wild Child. And why did we call him Wild? I talked earlier, if you weren't listening, talked about one day walking into the studio with my wife. And I said, I walked in first, and he was standing there just with his headphones on, totally nude, doing the show. But I remember getting a call from Norm Wayne one day, and I only lived 5 minutes from the radio station. And Norm called me and he said, "Hey, Duker, I want you to go down to the radio station. Something's going on with the Wild Child. Doesn't sound right. And I just want you to tell me what you see at the radio station." Well, it was during Christmas time, and before I walk in and tell you the story, we had a Christmas tree at our studio, and we all brought Christmas gifts for other people. And so what happened the day that we were opening the gifts, if someone had a pair of gloves, there was someone had opened the gift and taken one of the gloves out. If someone had a pair of socks, they had taken one sock out, and so somebody had to do that. And Norm Wayne believed that it was the Wild Child because who could do it during the day? So someone had to do it. So Wild Child was playing gags on everyone. So Norm Wayne said, "I want you to go down to the radio station. Just take a look around and tell me what you see." Well, I walked into the radio station, and I walked up. The sink in our kitchen had been ripped off of the wall. Our mailboxes had been ripped off of the wall. Every window in the radio station had been broken. The WIXY 1260 Super, our satellite studio, we called it. It was nothing but a truck with the turntables in it and stuff like that. But that's what we used when we went out to these remotes. And all the windows in that studio were broken. So I went back home and I called Norm and I said, "Norm, I'm assuming the Wild Child did it, but every window in the station has been broken." I talked about the turntables had been ripped off in the production studio. Unbelievable. So then he calls our program director, George Brewer, and he said, "George, I want you to fire the Wild Child right now. Get him out of the radio station." So George Brewer calls the Wild Child, who he was friends with because we were all very, very close. He said, "Child," he said, "I just want you to know what you've done to the radio station." Larry was there, told us what it was, and he said, "So you're fired." What we didn't realize is that the Wild Child during that conversation had put him on the air. So that conversation about him being fired went on the air. And got to remember, he had big numbers. Every teenager in Cleveland was listening to the Wild Child on WIXY 1260. And now they're listening to the guy that they love and adore and worship being fired. So the next day, the story hits the paper, the Wild Child fired, and it showed a picture of 500 to 1,000 kids out in front of our radio station demanding for him to come back on the air. So Norm Wayne, as Joe Zingale had mentioned earlier, we were all about promotions. So Norm Wayne looked at it and said, "All right, so we fired the guy. It was a terrible thing he did, but all the kids love him, and so this is a great promotion. It made the front page of the Plain Dealer, and so let's hire the guy back." So that was a great story regarding the Wild Child, and I just had to tell it. And then, of course, I've told the story about Billy Bass and Chuck Knapp. We were really a family. Even though we didn't spend much time together, I mean, I would never call Chuck Knapp or Wild Child and say, let's go out tonight. We didn't do that. But we did spend a lot of time on promotions together, so we got to not only really like each other, but and respect each other's shows and respect what we did on and off the air. But we were a real family, and I think that's what made WIXY 1260 as popular as it was. There are so many incredible stories to tell, and I might think of another one before I leave here in about another 6 or 7 minutes. But I would never. We don't have enough time for me to tell all the stories that we had on WIXY 1260. But I'll think of another one, and I'll be right back on WIXY 1260 with the Duker, Larry Morrow. That is Mark right here with the Duker, Larry Morrow on WIXY 1260. Ain't nothing cooking but the peas in the pot, and they wouldn't be cooking if the water wasn't hot. Ain't nothing shaking but the leaves on the trees, and they wouldn't be shaking if it wasn't for the breeze. The Duker, Larry Morrow on WIXY 1260 Online. I'm having the time of my life. You know, speaking of Motown, when I was at CKLW, Barry Gordy was just building his new company called Motown. And the DJs in Detroit were asked from time to time just to come by Motown USA and take a look at what Barry Gordy was doing. So I went by, and then Barry Gordy would say, "Hey, look, if you want one of my groups to come out to a record hop, just let me know and I'll send them out." So I went over one day asking Barry if I could have Smokey or whoever it was at the time, could have been Jackie Wilson, I'm not sure, to come to one of my record hops. And he said, "Now, Larry, I'm on the phone, but why don't you go into the other room? There's a young girl that we're thinking of signing. And why don't you go in there and just spend some time with her, and then I'll be probably in about another 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'll be back with both of you." So I go in the room, and here's this little 16-year-old girl throwing darts. And I said, "I'll throw darts with you." So she said, "Oh, good." So we played this little game of darts. That little girl turned out to be Diana Ross. What an incredible story. And then I had become friendly with Diana for a short period of time, and you know the rest of that story. Before I leave, I want to tell a Mike Ranieri story. Mike Ranieri was our morning man, and he was one of the funniest people on the face of the planet, and he made fun of me. He made fun of me every day. We would do a changeover every day at 10 o'clock that would last maybe 30 seconds to a minute. So I'm driving in, and I happen to have, and I'm very proud of it, my nose is longer than most people. So Mike Ranieri had fun always picking on my nose. So I'm listening on the way into the radio station one day, and Mike's got someone on the air, and the person on the air said, what time will the Duker be here? And it was maybe about 10 minutes before 10. And Mike said, "Well, the Duker's nose has arrived. The rest of his body will be here in 10 minutes. And then another day, this is one of the funniest stories ever. But unlike the guys at WIXY, I love to dress up because I was spending a lot of time at advertising agencies. So several times before I would go on the air, I might be visiting an advertising agency with one of our salespeople, trying to get more commercials on the radio station. So it was the first day of spring, and I thought, I'm going to go in dressed very spring-like. So I had a pair of green pants. Now look, this sounds weird, but it was very cool then. I thought it was very, very cool. I had a pair of green pants with the green shoes, and with green socks and white shoes. Patent leather shoes. And then I had a green shirt with a green and white tie, and then a green and white beautiful sport coat, seersucker sport coat. I walked in and I sat in front of Mike, and Mike said, "Why are you dressed like that?" And I said, "Mike, well, it's the first day of spring." He described what I had on. He says, "You look like the president of a lizard factory." He was just one of the funniest people on the planet. And another day I had on a leather jacket, and a leather sport coat. And Mike said, "Where'd you get that coat?" And I said, "Well, I bought it a couple of weeks ago." He said, "That looks like you took it off my dad's car. When people had leather suits." He said, "That looks like the leather off of my dad's car." He said, "Don't ever wear that jacket again. It's the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my life." But we made fun of each other. I would go on the air and then make fun of Mike, and Mike would make fun of me. But anyway, so back to Motown. Look, I just want to say I'm going to leave here. We've been here for a couple of hours. It feels like it's been 10 minutes. But do I have time to tell, even though it's the top of the hour, do I have time to tell a story about the Outsiders? When I was at CKLW, I fell in love with the song called "Time Won't Let Me" by the Outsiders. And then I found out later that they were from Cleveland. And so I continued to play the song, and I said, for those of you who live in Cleveland, and I didn't realize the impact that my show from 7 to midnight on CKLW, I didn't realize the impact that it had in Cleveland, and I found out later what it was. But anyway, so I fell in love with this song, and then so now the song becomes a giant hit. I come to Cleveland, and the first guy that I meet is the guy who was the lead singer of Time Won't Let Me. Remember who it was? Who? Tony Geraci. And so I get a call one day from this guy. He says, do you know my name? And I said, the name sounds familiar. He said, I'm the guy who wrote the song called, With the Outsiders. He says, I'm the lead singer, and I'm the guy who formed the group. And then we became dear close friends. And then, we lost Sonny Geraci about, I think 2 or 3 years ago, sadly enough. And but the last time I was with him, I was signing books and he was performing. I said, Sonny, look at the impact that you had on the music world. And he said, it never would have been that way had I not you becoming so in love with our song when you were on this big radio station in Detroit. Great story. All right, so anyway, so you know how much I love Motown. So I will see you again soon. So in the meantime, as I used to close every single show, do all the good you can to every time, to do all the good you can to everyone you can, every single time you can. Love you all. This is WIXY1260 Online. Thanks, guys, for having me here. I've loved every single second of it.
WIXY. Larry Morrow. Radio.